Hello, citizens of the world. We are anonymous.
Millions of people in Puerto Rico are still without clean water. They're without power or cell service. It's been almost a week since Hurricane Maria made a direct hit on the island, and people are worried about how they're going to be able to take care of their families.
It's been chaotic. It's been horrible. It's been like a war zone everywhere. If it was me alone, I would be here. You know, I'll stick it out. I'll not bathe for 5 days. I don't care. I'll sweat. But the kids, it's different. You know, they get hungry. They have necessities that right now I cannot provide for them.
We are joined now on the phone by one of the victims of the hurricane, Fernando Oliver. Fernando, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Heather.
So you are a native of Puerto Rico. You've lived there 40 plus years, San Juan specifically, for the majority of your life. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Not at all. We've been through several hurricanes, Hugo, Georges, Hortense. I personally have been through a couple of other hurricanes in Florida, and never like this.
What about your property, your family? How are you doing?
We took some damage, minor damage on the homes. Many homes were flooded. It was raining sideways, so the windows didn't hold up in terms of the water. So pretty much all of the population dealt with that.
Do you think... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, many others lost their homes. You know, complete roofs, complete homes destroyed. It was total devastation.
Yeah. And do you think, though, that Puerto Rico was prepared? Do you think that the preparation was put in place early enough? And do you think if that had happened, that it wouldn't be that bad?
I don't think there's any place prepared for a Category 5, maybe 4, almost 5 hurricane. The situation, the way the winds happened, the howling, the destruction. I don't think any country would be prepared for something like this, to be quite frankly. However, I mean, many people bought generators in advance. Many people stocked with food, but it was for a few days, perhaps 4 days, 5 days at most. So the situation is going to get complicated here pretty soon. And
you need the generators, but you're running out of fuel. There are reports of running out of fuel. You have no power across the entire island.
That is correct. The situation right now, other than humanitarian help for those areas that are needed where there was complete flooding, people losing their whole homes, those people need a lot of help, and authorities have to get to those places that are incommunicated. In addition to that, people want to help, but they need gasoline to get to those places. And right now the lines are 4, 5, 6 hours long, and I know the government is trying to get gasoline to the gas stations that are working. But the process is not working. They need to improve the process so that people stay calm and they can help with this restoration of the country. We need gas, we need diesel to get to the right places, hospitals, businesses, distribution centers of food, trucks need to get food from their warehouses to the supermarkets. There's desperate need for that.
Yeah, we got word that the President Trump, will be there next Tuesday. I know some other lawmakers are headed there Friday. What more can they do? And what type of help do you need from the private sector, or are you getting?
In terms of the private sector, I think the government needs to get resources to them in terms of diesel, fuel, trucks, construction, cranes, any sort of equipment that can be used to rebuild will be needed. In terms of the government getting aid to these areas that are desolated, that have no communication, food, water. There are municipalities, and the mayors of the different municipalities are claiming for help. That help needs to get to them in an orderly fashion. So I think once the gas situation settles, the diesel situation settles, we have many businesses ready to operate and run with power generators. We just need the diesel to get to them consistently so that people know what they can expect and we can get back on our feet.
Yeah, the governor warned that the possibility of a humanitarian crisis. Do you think that's taking it too far, or is that how you would describe it?
That's exactly how I would describe it. There are many areas in the island that are desolated. There are communities of people that need a lot of help. It's not there's no exaggeration whatsoever as to what's being reported.
Well, we see the pictures.
The situation is dire, and again, as soon as businesses start opening, as soon as there's an element of normality or normalcy returns to the island, people will start getting calm, and people want to work. I see people wanting to get to their jobs, but they can't because there's no gas, and there's no gas in the stations where they need to fuel their vehicles. It's not that there's not gas in the island.
Good day to the Citzens of this world. And to all my Boricua. With Puerto Rico's electric grid in shambles after Hurricane Maria, gasoline and diesel have become liquid gold in this U.S. territory. The island's 3.4 million residents urgently need it to fuel their automobile tanks and power generators to light their homes and businesses. But like so many other necessities here, the distribution of fuel is reliant on a transportation network crippled by the storm. Puerto Rico gets most of its fuel sent by ship from the United States. But restrictions at its ports, with one closed and another operating only during the daytime, has limited shipping. Meanwhile, tanker trucks have had difficulty navigating the island's blocked and damaged roads. U.S. Air Force Colonel Michael Valle, on hand for relief efforts in San Juan, said he was most concerned about the level of desperation that could arise if fuel distribution did not return to normal within a couple of weeks. Complicating those efforts is the shutdown of Puerto Rico's primary fuel storage point. Known as the Yabucoa Terminal, the facility is located in the hard-hit southeastern part of the island, where Maria first made landfall. The terminal was closed prior to the storm and has yet to reopen, according to Buckeye Partners, the terminal operator, which said a full assessment of the facility is underway. Yabucoa can store up to 4.6 million barrels of crude oil, gasoline or products like fuel oil and diesel needed for power generation. That storage point is used for distribution for other islands in the Caribbean as well. Adding to Puerto Rico's difficulties is the sudden surge in demand for diesel to power generators. A shipping broker who was not authorized to speak to the press said concerns about diesel supplies were growing. The few gas stations operating in Puerto Rico have attracted miles-long lines of cars, where drivers wait 7 hours or longer in queues that snake through neighborhoods, up highway exit ramps and onto freeways. People here are going crazy trying to find gas, said motorist Peter Matos, 60, of Yorko, a city in the southwestern part of the island. I have about half a tank left. Puerto Rico Governor Ricardo Rossello told mayors he will work with U.S. authorities to improve fuel distribution, said Israel Morales, a communications advisor to municipalities in Puerto Rico. The day after the storm hit, Rossello advised mayors that there was sufficient fuel, Morales said. But the problem was distribution, as it was stored at the ports and terminals on the island, and could not be easily routed to areas that needed it. The island's residents use about 155,000 barrels of fuel a day, less than 1% of the 19 million barrels consumed daily in the United States. Puerto Rico has no operating refineries, as the last one idled in 2009. The good news is that the port of San Juan, the island's primary port, has experienced minimal damage, according to Jose Luis Ayala, Chairman and Director General of Puerto Rico's division of shipping company Crowley Maritime Corporation. He said ships carrying fuel were moved south out of Hurricane Maria's path, and were able to get to the port of San Juan once the terminal reopened on Friday. Even though there was some damage, it was functional, he said. According to Thomson Reuters shipping data, 3 vessels were unloading fuel at San Juan as of Tuesday, while 3 others were waiting for opportunities to unload as well. Large convoys of fuel trucks were seen traveling the highways on Monday, the first time in several days those vehicles were out in force. Hospitals and fuel stations are taking deliveries of diesel via trucks escorted by armed guards. In the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico is dealing with horrifying devastation. One thing that could help with a recovery that's bound to be long and difficult is opening the ports to emergency supply-laden foreign boats. Plenty such boats come and go to the US that could be deployed for that task, but there's a catch: they're not allowed to unload their wares on the island. Under a long-standing US law, the 1920 Merchant Marine Act, all the transportation of goods between US ports has to be done by US vessels exclusively. This means that ships from other countries can't transport supplies between US harbors. That limits the number of available boats, even in unusual, extreme situations such as what Puerto Rico is experiencing now. In the wake of past natural disasters, the US has temporarily lifted the rule known as the Jones Act after its sponsor, Senator Wesley Jones. The Department of Homeland Security did that earlier this month in response to Hurricanes Harvey and Irma, which hammered the Gulf and Atlantic coasts. But the federal agency has kept the Jones Act in place after Maria hit Puerto Rico, despite pleas by several Puerto Rican members of Congress. A group of lawmakers is asking Homeland Security, the agency that oversees the rule, to waive it for a year. Temporarily loosening these requirements, for the express purpose of disaster recovery, will allow Puerto Rico to have more access to the oil needed for its power plants, food, medicines, clothing, and building supplies, they wrote in a letter to Homeland Security Acting Secretary Elaine Duke. The agency says the situation in Puerto Rico after Maria is different than that of regions on the mainland after Harvey and Irma, since those hurricanes put some high-capacity fuel pipelines out of commission. Boats were therefore needed to move those supplies, it said. The agency's assessment is that there are sufficient boats to serve Puerto Rico. The limitation is going to be port capacity to offload and transfer cargo, not vessel availability, it said in a statement. Indeed, some gridlock has already emerged in Puerto Rico. Containers are piling up at ports as goods arrive faster than trucks can haul them away, according to local reports. But longer term, increasing the supply of delivery boats would help Puerto Rico, which was already in dire straits before the arrival of Maria. The island has been stuck in a downward economic spiral for years. Its weakened economy is overly dependent on imports. For example, they account for more than 80% of its food supplies. Those and other goods are mostly delivered by just 3 U.S. transportation companies. The result, according to a government-commissioned report by former International Monetary Fund economists, Puerto Rico pays twice as much for imports from the U.S. as neighboring U.S. Virgin Island, which is exempted from the Jones Act. The Homeland Security Department says under law, it can only waive the Jones Act for purposes of national security, and that the potential cost savings of lifting the law is not material to our decision-making. Under the Act, for a ship to be allowed cabotage, or transportation of goods and people between 2 harbors in the same country, it has to satisfy all 3 of these conditions. Be US built, US owned, and US flag carrying, which means the ship is registered as American. The law's original intent was to fortify the US shipbuilding industry after World War I. Nearly 100 years later, that goal is no longer realistic. Only 5 large shipyards survive in the country, and the number of American-built vessels has shrunk dramatically. Between 2006 and 2011, the U.S.-built, owned, and operated fleet shrank 17%, according to a study by the Grassroot Institute of Hawaii. That means there's only so many boats that meet all 3 conditions available to deliver goods in Puerto Rico. Some locals have long argued for the permanent suspension of the Jones Act, saying it's crippling Puerto Rico's economy. The fact that the U.S. is refusing to lift it even temporarily in the midst of a major emergency does not bode well for their cause. To help organize a drive in your community, but before you do that, check to make sure there isn't one there so you don't waste valuable time. At the time of this writing we still have relatives unaccounted for. Help sign the Jones Act. Link in the description. We are anonymous. We are the truth that's hiding in the dark. We are the last stand for humanity. We are your neighbors. We are humanity. We are a legion. And we are now. Expect us.